Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at Pure London. I'm Carol Walton. I'm an author, broadcaster, founder of the podcast If Jewels Could Talk, and co-founder of a charity that mentors young people into the jewellery industry and helps preserve skills and crafts. And I'm here today to talk with Piers Carpenter, who, as you can see, has been held up. So I thought we'd have a little chat initially about the role of jewellery today, what we think about it, the role of jewellery in Vogue, and what I and other editors look for when we're looking to find new rising stars, new pieces to feature in magazine shoots. I don't know if you've all watched All the Glitters. I guess you have, which is why you're here to see Piers. But it's great, and I was so happy that the BBC have done this, because I think when you look at television now, absolutely every aspect of modern life is represented. You know, we bake, we pot, there's art, there's driving schools. There was literally everything apart from jewellery. And I feel very passionately that jewellery is one of the most important things that we do. It's certainly one of the first, as human beings, that we started adorning ourselves. It was the first art form. The first thing that we ever did was pick up shells, leaves, feathers, anything to adorn ourselves. And as soon as humans figured out how to use metals, they then made these natural forms into wreaths, into earrings, into rings. And it always strikes me when I go around museums and you look at Egyptian jewellery or ancient Etruscan jewellery, that actually you could take it out of the cabinet and put it on, and no one would think that you didn't have anything fabulous that didn't fit with now, which is not the same as anything else. The shoes, the clothes, you wouldn't be able to wear that from the ancient times in the way that jewellery you are able to. And I think, therefore, it's something fundamental that we all do. Every civilization, every culture around the world, we have that in common. And I think jewellery is something that shows how much we all have in common, as opposed to how different we all are. And I'm just looking at this lady here in the front row with her fabulous gold hoops on, and I think it is just something that everybody wears: a hoop, a ring, a charm, and it's just something that really connects us all around the world. So that's why I was thrilled that the BBC started doing this programme, because I think it was long overdue that jewellery should be represented, and people want to learn and understand more about it. And this programme does help that. And it helps find new designers, because we should all support our local designers, I think. It's quite hard to get started now. Piers has obviously had this platform of being on television, but I think it's quite hard for young designers leaving college to get themselves started. And I think it's something that, through the Goldsmiths Hall, looking online, we can all find our local jewellers and actually try and support them. Because I think also jewellery that you've been involved with, that you understand how it's made, and you know about the materials that have gone into it to create it, I think that makes it much more special. And I think it adds to the air of magic, because jewellery is something that's very, it's the most emotional thing we wear. It's plugged in with, I think, our identity. I think when people choose things to wear, it does speak about them, not just their style. I think it speaks about their personality, how they see themselves, and maybe just the tribe they belong to, because we all like to belong. And we sort of carry these things, I think, as sort of emblems and ways to connect with each other and the people who've gone before us. So you might wear something that your grandmother, that you inherited from your grandmother, or that means something in particular. And I think that's why when you see someone, I often think that jewellery is the conversation starter. It's sort of, where does that come from? Where did you find it? What's it made from? What does it mean to you? And I think there's always a story, which is why I called my podcast If Jewels Could Talk, because I think there's always a story that jewellery will tell you. So when I've been sort of looking for stories for many years, I've been the jewellery director of Vogue for over 20 years. I'm still with Vogue as a contributor, but I tend to write more books now and do podcasts. And I always look to sort of create a story. If there wasn't one, I'd like to sort of make one. Find a trend, have a look at what people were wearing and making, and there may be a sort of idea suddenly that everyone was suddenly using green stones. Suddenly there was a lot of lime green peridot or zavarites, and I'd suddenly spot something like that, and then you want to sort of weave it all together and show some new pieces. So what would I look for when I went to see jewelers? I think I'd always look for something that jumped out. It's sort of very hard to say what you're specifically looking for, but when you see something new that you hadn't seen before, it definitely jumps out at you. So looking for people who had a sort of unique point of view, something that, as I said, I hadn't seen before, something that was authentic to them, that I felt they weren't copying or jumping on a trend, that they had a sort of unique style, and that was transparent through most of their work. And so then it's quite a sort of creative process. I'd sort of have an idea. I'd go to the editor, say, this is what my idea is. She'll say, do 6 pages for the March issue. And then it would be finding a photographer that I think would bring that idea to life. If we're using a model, it's working with the fashion team to think of girl to call clothes in that might tell the story. If it was a nautical story, obviously lots of blue, white, playing on that sort of theme. It might be a new Romani gypsy trend. So it's basically trying to sort of set the scene and sort of create the atmosphere for the different ideas that I've had. But I think jewelry is quite special in the way that it's very visual, it's an art form, but I also think it comes to life in the written word as well, and in the spoken word, that you can describe these things. And as I said, in describing how it's been made, or what it was made for, or the work that's gone into it, there is always a story there that comes alive, I think. And for me, that's part of the interest in that. I love looking back at what people have worn before, because jewelry is never made in isolation. It's always made to resonate with the time in which it's being worn. And yesterday, I spent the whole day researching tiaras, because I think if we're ever going to be talking about tiaras, we're going to be talking about them in the next few months because of the coronation coming up. And this morning I was at Goldsmiths Hall judging a tiara design competition. They'd all been asked to incorporate peridot and diamonds into tiara designs. And it was rather wonderful actually looking at some young designers' ideas of how to make the tiara into a sort of modern head ornament that people would wear, that would fit maybe with what they wear now, how they could wear it every day and also wear it for something like the coronation. And so looking at these tiaras yesterday and sort of researching them, it was just so amazing to look at some that would have been worn by the Romanovs in the Winter Palace at a ball. And so just looking at the jewel, the whole time comes alive, because I think they really speak of the time in which people live. And so what do I think that is resonant of our time? I think recently it was very interesting how in the time of COVID, suddenly jewelers, small jewelers, big brands, everybody was making jewelry with locks. I mean, literally, padlocks, keys. And it was just sort of resonating, this whole lockdown situation that we'd all been living through. And the jewelry certainly was being made that resonated with the experience that we'd all had. I think we all live in very casual ways. Nobody dresses differently in the evening, really. We want things that we do wear all day. And I think people are wearing very personal things. And I think the effect of COVID had that on jewelry as well, that I think people realized the importance of their relationships. And so I've noticed really this idea that people have, more initials, charms, engraved pieces, things that are very personalized about particular relationships. And I think people were doing that a lot. And I've heard from a lot of jewelers that people were having things made because they wanted that sort of personal touch in it and to personalize it for them, so it really meant something more. And I also think it's because we all dress the same now, really. We all wear jeans and jackets, and actually it's the jewelry that gives you your personality and individuality. So I've noticed that. Pearls for guys. There's something that I've noticed recently at Vogue parties that we've had, and I was in Miami in November with Dolce & Gabbana at the Miami Design Fair and big party there, that the guys are beginning to outdo the girls in terms of jewelry. They're loading it on, they're wearing fabulous pearl necklaces, they're wearing great brooches, modern brooches, antique brooches. And so I've sort of said at the design fair there, girls, you've got to up your game a bit. We can't be overtaken by the guys. But particularly men are wearing pearls. Timothée Chalamet was on the cover of Vogue a few months ago wearing pearls. I mean, it's a big trend. Although I think jewelry now I don't describe as being unisex. I sort of do see it as genderless. I think everyone wears everything, and it's just a matter of their personal style. But I have noticed men owning the brooches a bit. They wear jackets more, maybe. That's why brooches need to be supported. Often if we're wearing silk shirts, it's hard for a brooch to support that. But it's a great art form, the brooch, and I think a realistic one that we can all wear. A tiara is maybe not so realistic. But I am talking because, as we say, we have the empty chair for Piers. Now, if anyone is a student here, when I go and give talks to colleges and schools, I say the first thing to get on is to turn up on time and to have hit your deadline. And I said, you're ahead of the game if you've done that. But anyway, not today for Piers. So I wondered if anybody would like to ask me about jewelry, fashion, Vogue, because I thought it would be lovely to have a little Q&A and have a mutual chat about that. So does anyone have a question? Great, there's a lady here in the front. Is the mic on over here, please?
Now I think we're working. Fantastic. I'm loud, but I'm not that loud. I'm only half American.
Now
I can
we
only
can
care
hear
so
you.
much. First of all, thank you. That's been a lovely beginning of the talk. I had a question in terms of London Fashion Week. I'm going to go to a couple different events, and
Yes.
I've already packed everything. Oh, thank you. And I was wondering what you think the trends for jewellery at London Fashion Week are going to be? A few little bits.
Well, God, that is like having a crystal ball. I think at the moment we do have a bit of everything. I think yellow gold is winning out right now. I just think yellow gold looks right. I have lots of silver. I love silver. I like white gold. But I just think yellow for me right now is the thing. So I think the yellow trend will be there, even though it is quite expensive, as you all know at the moment. I think there'll be more pearls, pearls for earrings, necklaces. I think the beads, long beads, I think we'll see a lot of those. But usually there is quite an array, and pretty much you can find all sorts of things. There's lots of enameling right now, and I'm looking for sustainability because obviously that's a big hot topic. And I just had Maria Sole Ferragamo of the Ferragamo family on my podcast, and she uses offcuts of leather from the leather shoes and brass shavings to make earrings, which are really, they look great. They're a little enameled on the side, and so I think there'll be a lot of talk about sustainability because obviously it's something that we all have to be incredibly aware of, and the traceability of, and a lot of recycled gold. So thank you for that question, and have a great time at London Fashion Week. Now, everybody, we can welcome Piers Carpenter, the winner of All That Glitters. Well done for making it, Piers.
Thank you. I just wanted to say sorry to everyone. I left my house at 10:30 this morning, and I've had the journey from hell. But I'm here. I made it.
Well done. You've got a very nice medallion on.
Oh, thank you. I'm a big fan of old things. So it's an old sovereign. It's a
Okay.
Victoria.
Not a St. Christopher's, the patron saint of travellers.
No, it should be.
Anyway, Piers, so let's, congratulations, first of all, for winning the show. And I was just talking about how great it is to have it on the BBC and to have jewellery shown and all its magic of creation. I must say that when I watched it, I don't know how many of you all here watched it, what came across to me was how competitive you are. And I wondered if you hadn't have won, how would that have gone down with you?
Devastating. It's not so much the competitiveness, it's more, I don't know, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it as best as I can do it, or as well as I know I can do it. And building that pressure up just becomes sort of overpowering, and it does come out in quite a competitive way. But if you spoke to any of my friends, they'd all say that I'm the most laid-back, easy-going person.
Didn't look it on the programme.
No, that's the thing. When it was something that I really wanted to do, and I really wanted to win, so I just sort of became a bit fixated on it.
And I guess they edit it. Do they decide your character and then they edit round it, do you think?
I don't know. Possibly. It is a hard one. They said, because I was very wary of how, I beat around the bush when I talk a lot of the time and don't get to the point and say things the right way. So I was worried that they'd use bits of things that I've said that come across in a bad way if you don't hear the whole thing. But they were quite fair, and there was nothing really that they put in that I was sort of unhappy with.
But I must say, Dinny, I think in the penultimate episode, Dinny Hall, one of the jewellery judges, said, oh gosh, anything can happen in the final period, anything can happen. But I felt from the very beginning it was a two-horse race. It was you and Jack.
I mean, I would agree. I think we were both very consistent the whole way through. So there was no pieces that we sort of made that were not made well. It might have come down to design that wasn't liked, but all the pieces that we both made were sort of made to a high level. So I'd agree with that. I suppose I was just lucky enough to just sort of
Pip him at the post.
Yeah.
And tell me, what got you into jewellery to start with?
So what sparked my interest was my work experience. cut a long story short, my work experience got messed up, and my mum knew a person who had a jeweller's local to us, and she asked him, and I went there, and I'd already had a piece of jewellery made by the goldsmiths that worked there, but when you don't see it, you don't sort of imagine that it actually can be a real job. And now it seems stupid, but at the time it was like, oh yeah, well, I got a ring made, that was it. But then actually seeing him work on it, work on things while I was doing my work experience, I sort of became, again, fixated, and I was just like, that's it, that's what I want to do.
So you did an apprenticeship?
Yes, I'd done an informal apprenticeship, so I didn't do the college part with it, if that makes sense. I've just learned from being sort of at the workbench 5 days a week. But that only came much, much later on. So I worked in the shop downstairs when I left school, and I think about 5 or 6 years I was pestering the guy upstairs to teach me, until he actually did, started to take me on as an apprentice.
And you had this sort of process on the program, which as you've just said, your jewellery making is underpinned with a sort of classical training in goldsmithing, but you had this sort of learning curve, really, which sometimes I think when one learns new things, it's incredibly uncomfortable. But they were sort of pushing you on the design front, weren't they?
Yeah, most definitely. That's my biggest takeaway from going on the show is designing. Before that, I hadn't ever really done it, and I was obviously forced to sort of try and come up with something different, and it really didn't feel great at the time, but having been pushed even to doing the obscure challenges with sort of unusual materials, that is my biggest takeaway from it. Now I feel so much more confident in my own sort of design capabilities, whereas before I didn't sort of have that confidence.
Was it hard though when they were pushing you? Did you feel kind of a bit resentful, like I'm going away from what I've learnt all this time?
Most definitely. At the time I thought, that's a bit not stupid, but that's a bit odd. That's not what jewellers do. But then after doing it, I don't know, it changed my mind massively.
And now you've just completed your first collection.
Yes. So again, I don't really know how you'd describe it. It's all snake themed, which
one of the classic emblems of jewellery.
Yeah. I mean, when I was working in the shop, I saw loads of Victorian snake rings, and there was one in particular that I saw that I absolutely loved. I just thought it was mind-blowing, and that made me make the first ring that I ever made myself, and then that ring is what I base my collection on. I thought when I started designing something, what should I base it on? You could make anything, and I thought I want to make it personal. So I thought, why not make it based on the first ring I made for myself.
Is it a snake eating its tail?
No. It's very traditional.
Yes.
And
a nice sapphire on its head.
Yeah. It's, I probably would make it differently now if I made it again, but because it's the first thing that I made for myself, it holds like a real, real heartstring for me, and I wear it pretty much every day. So,
well, it's quite flattering for Piers because Sean Lean, one of our great British jewellers, who's a judge on all that glitters, has actually ordered one of those rings, and I know that because he told me from your first collection.
Yeah, he has.
So that's very flattering.
Yes, I mean, I was over the moon. I haven't told anyone. I don't know how these sort of things work when people, of that sort of level want things. It's like, oh, okay, I'll just keep everything quiet, won't say anything. But yes, he has, and obviously over the moon. Again, it's like that sort of reassurance. When you design things, you're always worrying, what if people don't like it? What if you've got it completely wrong? What if it's something you like, but no one else will? And then to get, obviously all the way through the show, I had him sort of praise, some of the pieces I made, but then to actually in the sort of real world, for him to commission that piece is.
Were you quite nervous of him to start with? Because, Sean, I don't know if you've seen the programme, he has his loop, and it's always a scary moment when Sean gets his loop out to have a look at how close, a very close look to see how well it's made. Were you scared of that?
I was and I wasn't. I think when you make things, you will be your own worst critic. If, there's a tiny little bit of solder somewhere that you don't like, you will see it, and you'll go, oh, that's not that good. And that's what I try and not do, because a lot of things like that you can quite easily leave. And you think, oh no, that'll be all right. But every time I say to myself, that'll be all right, is when that phrase is what I catch myself doing. And I'll say, no, if you've said that, then it's not. It wants to be perfect. If you're sort of trying to justify it, it's not.
So you were trying to be perfect, but it was a very, very quick time scale. Did you find that hard to work in the time limit that they gave you to make quite complicated pieces?
Most definitely. The time scales that they gave you is the program bit of it. That's what gets, that's what gives the drama. In the real world, although all of us proved that it can be done to the level that you would ever give something to a customer, it can't be, if that makes sense. The pieces that we made for the show, I think they were quite lenient in the fact that they knew realistically those time frames are unachievable to have something of a certain level, if you know what I mean. You can make something, but in the real world, say you get given 6 hours, in the real world you'd spend 12, 15, because you want it. Everything that gets worn by a customer of mine, I see as an advert. It's a free advert for me. If it's something that is wow, all their friends, all their family say, oh my God, that's beautiful, where'd you get that from? And that is, if you ever put anything out there that's not up to your level, even if you think, oh no, that'll be all right, it's not. You want to. I think that's what I always try and do, and it served me quite well.
So you're saying you weren't too scared because you knew that you'd done it really well, and Sean wasn't going to find those flaws.
Yeah. I mean, there was things. What I'm trying to say is, I am my own worst critic, and it's not nice when you hear critiques from other people, but when you hear them from someone sort of so esteemed as Sean, it's. I don't know, it's not a privilege. You wouldn't say it's a privilege, but it's a learning curve.
It's learning, isn't it? And has it made a big difference to your business, winning the show?
Yeah, most definitely. So beforehand, it would only ever be local customers that I would sort of have and people that I knew. Whereas, and I never really pushed for it either. I sort of thought, well, I've got a 9 to 5. I'm doing all right. That's fine. Went on the show, and then it was the design in all of it. After I finished the show, I got my hallmark. I didn't have my own maker's mark, before that, and I thought, what, I'll deserve a treat. And then that inspired me to make the collection, which has sold really well. And then obviously now I have people emailing me from Wales. Birmingham, Wales and Birmingham, have people come down and see me, which is like a 3-hour drive.
So is it a good thing now that, years ago when people were starting off, they'd come to me at Vogue and say, I want to get into Harrods, or I want to get into Brown's department store. And now I think nobody does that. They want to be online, they want their own business, they want to create their own brand and have brand identity through the internet or social media.
Most definitely. I mean, my mum keeps pestering me to help me with my website and all of that sort of stuff because she is quite good at it. But and it's a bit control freaky, but I feel like my brand, so to speak, is me. So my website I built myself. Everything I do myself. It's not that I don't want to give it away, and I know at some point I probably will have to, but it's sort of like my little baby, and I want it to represent me in every sort of way.
I think it should, and I don't see why. Your mum knows you better than anyone, so I'd say let her have free reign on your site.
Yeah, maybe one day. It's I don't know. It's so hard. At this stage, I never know what the right thing is to do. You know, it's funny. I was speaking to someone who was the consultant for the show, and he's a lecturer at the Birmingham University. And I went and saw him recently, and he was telling me all about what they do, how they learn there, and they learn about ideal sort of customers, making mood boards of the customers, what sort of budget they would have, and they learn all about the selling, which I've never learned anything like that. So I'm trying to do what feels right for me, and I haven't got a sort of set sheet that I can look at and go, oh, that's the next bit, that's the next bit. I'm just sort of feeling my way through.
Are you aware of trends? Will you go to London Fashion Week?
Obviously, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone can not be aware of trends. I may well go to London Fashion Week. It's something. It's a hard one because trends obviously are very good for selling, but if you're following trends or you're on trend, then it's very good for, you know, you'll sell more pieces because it's current. But trends do also go in and out of fashion. And with jewellery, as it is, you know, generally very expensive, I feel like sort of you want to have something that is constant.
It's that eternal challenge for the jeweller. It is what we were just sort of talking about before you arrived. It's that thing of making something that speaks of the time we live in, but something that people will always wear. And that is terrifically challenging, and I think it's more difficult than fashion. It's just is the most difficult thing, and jewellery design that does it well, I just think should be applauded, because it really, and it's the things by which we know about the periods that humans have lived. You look at a great Art Deco piece, and it speaks of Art Deco. You know, you look at an Edwardian piece, and it just conjures up their time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you saw, you know, a Cartier piece from the 1920s, it's sort of unmistakable. You'd look at it and you say that is Cartier, or it's someone else doing what Cartier. You can see it instantly.
So, what do you think people are wearing now and looking for?
When I started the collection that I've just done, I was really big into green. I know that sounds.
You were being.
Big into green, the colour green.
We love green. We love green.
So I went down that sort of road. With all the collection, it's really hard when you design something. You want it to just be a bit of you, you know, something that I would wear. So that's what I sort of base it on. And I don't, like I said, want to sort of follow a trend. I'm not going to say be ahead of the trend, because I'm not a guru on that sort of thing, but I want to make things that I want to make, and someone will just be like, wow, I've not seen it before.
Small one-off.
Yeah.
But you're doing a collection, so kind of limited.
Limited amounts. In jewellery at the moment, I'm sort of fixated on the way that the light bounces off of pieces. So I've done a lot of things with different angles on them, so that when you see it in the light, they sort of really twinkle, rather than being sort of single-dimensional pieces. And I've just sort of gone with that general theme. The collection's sort of Art Deco. I'm a massive fan of Art Deco, and all sort of historical jewellery. I think that you could go back through any of it, and there's fantastic pieces, and they're so sort of stylised of the time.
Well, I think what I love about them is they're modern now, even though they were made then. I mean, this is my favourite period, you can't really see, but it's sort of a real modernist, sort of late 1920s, and it's all about cogs, wheels, shafts, because they were sort of fixated on aeroplanes, and motor cars, because it was all incredibly new. And I think that still looks modern.
Yeah.
So that's why I like it. But also, I think what comes into a sort of modern ways is how you wear it, because putting that medallion around your polo neck looks modern.
Exactly, and
so
I mean
how
it's
you style it can
Yeah.
also come into it.
yeah, and I mean this chain is Victorian, so it's a Victorian piece all in itself, and I'm actually making another one at the moment. So it's, I don't know, you can also, I like putting the little spins. I think most things in jewellery, I'm not going to say have been done, because I always try and make things that
Well,
I've
you're
not
limited
seen.
because we have to wear it, and it has to be seen, and so
Yeah.
you are. It's going round in a trying to find new discovery of something that's been done
Yeah,
before.
but I think what has been done before, although the concept might have been done, the execution can be completely different. So you can go, make something that would be Georgian, and someone would say, "Oh yeah, that looks really Georgian," and just put a little modern twist on it that just carries it on as something that hasn't been done before. If that makes sense.
So you relieve the programmes over.
I am. It finished so long ago, the actual filming. In between the filming and it coming out on the telly was, I don't know, must have been 9 months that was sworn to secrecy. And by the time it actually sort of came out, it just felt like a distant dream. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, well done, it's so good." And I was like, yeah. But it is, and I think it just takes a while to actually sort of sink in. But the sort of consequences it's had on the work that I'm doing is night and day, really. I'm also getting approached with a lot more interesting sort of commissions, whereas before it would be a lot more simpler things. Now some people, I think if you've watched the programme, it sort of gets, a consumer or a customer's sort of mind thinking about, oh, well, you can literally have anything. And then because they sort of associate me with it, then
They'll ask you.
They ask me, and
That's terrific.
Yeah.
And so that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations again.
Thank
and
you.
I don't know if any of you got a question. We'll go back to question time. Anyone got a question for Piers or about jewellery? Hi, could we have the microphone?
Yeah, first of all, lovely talk. So I just wanted to ask, I can imagine that you're a perfectionist, right? So has there ever been a time that this perfectionism has put you at a disadvantage, perhaps? Or have you just made it like one of your biggest strengths, or anything like that?
It's a hard question. I mean, it does often give you hard choices. So I recently made a bee brooch, and I, pierced out the wings, and it took me a long time to do. I put them on, soldered them on, and there was just something off. I couldn't put my picture on it. It was design-wise, it was off at a slight angle. So I took them off. I made them again, and I put them on, and I wasn't happy again.
Yeah.
So I took them off and made some new ones and put new ones on. So that's 3 times the work for that specific thing. By the end of the project, if when you take time into consideration, I didn't make real money. I was sort of giving up time for free. But that is when I think you have to, like I said, everything, whether it's clothing or jewellery, anything that you put out there, people who like it will always ask, and people who don't like it might even ask.
Yeah.
So if your name's attached to anything, I think you always have to be a perfectionist. And it does come with downfalls, but overall I'd say it's a better thing to be than not.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
There's a lady in the front.
Thank you for the interview. I would like to know, what was your motivation to enter the competition of jewelleries? What the real story behind that? And what do you feel when you're making the jewellery in the process? What is your attachment with what you're doing?
So I didn't want to apply for the show. Me and my wife watched the first season of it and absolutely loved it. Like, we were standing up cheering, like we had our favourite that we wanted to win. And at the end of the show,
Is it Hugo?
yeah, it was Hugo. And at the end of the show, it said, anyone who can make jewellery, we'd love for you to apply. But it's definitely not my sort of thing. I'm more of a just happy working at my workbench. And my wife was like, "Oh, go and apply." I was like, "Nah." She's like, "Go on." I was like, "Nah." And then she just got the application up on her phone and was like, "Oh, go on, just do it." So I thought, okay, well, they won't pick me anyway. Like, I'm just a boring sort of normal person. And then there was different stages of getting onto it, and I just kept getting through until the last stage, and they were like, "Yeah, we want you on the programme. We start filming in 2 weeks." And I was like, "Oh, okay." and that's how it started. But I am so glad that I did get to go on it. And making wise, when I'm sat at my workbench, it's like a really sort of safe place for me. So the filming, I was so nervous all the time. I wasn't sat down making. I'd sort of, when we had to do all the looking at the camera stuff and all of that, it was horrible. I'd sit down, start working. About 10 minutes in, I just lose track of time. I get so sort of fixated on what I want to do and what the next bit is, and I don't know, I just get really sort of into it.
Did Catherine Ryan make you laugh a lot? Was that quite off-putting?
I don't know, it's a hard one. It probably is off-putting, but I'm a big fan of her sort of comedy anyway, so, and she's a lot funnier off the cuff than what the things that were sort of written for her. But I really enjoyed her. It was very off-putting. You got 10 minutes left, and you've got 20 minutes work left, and then they come up to you and start talking to you, and then you carry on. I had one time I was carrying on working and talking, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, no. So can you just stop and look at them when you're talking?" I was like, "Are you joking?" But yeah.
Well, I think if there's a moral to that story, you have to listen to the women in your life, your wife and your mother.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're obviously a great support and right behind you.
Yeah, I think, like I said, before I'd done this show, I didn't really have that much confidence in myself. I knew what work I could put out, but I didn't have the sort of confidence in myself. So having my wife that did was
We've got time for one more
fantastic.
question. If there's anybody else with one final question. Over here.
Hello, thank you for this interview. I have a question actually for the both of you, as I'm planning to launch my own fine jewelry brand. What does it mean to you being different right now, as there are lots of brands everywhere? We're kind of bombarded with brands. What does different mean to you for a fine jewelry brand? Thank you.
I think it's something unique that is about you and that you do slightly differently, because as we've said, you've got the stones people have used before, you've got the ears to work with, all the fingers, but there's something about yours that has a signature, that each piece you can see your sort of style. So it's your point of view. You have a fresh point of view, and try and find that. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say that a brand, everyone thinks of brands as big brands, like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, which they're so far escalated that they're not personal. But if you're starting something yourself, my personal advice would be that it has to be you. Something that and you have to be passionate about it. If you're passionate about something, you can sell it, or you'll put in the extra hours to do it. If it's something that you think, I'll make a little bit of money, some people do, but I think if you have the passion, you'll go the extra mile, and it will be sort of about you and your story, and you will become the brand.
And pull the people in so they see how you're doing it, they know your process, and that is part of the magic, really. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It's been great to hear more from you, Piers. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and apologies to everyone that I was late again. I'm sorry.
So do follow Piers, follow me at Carol Woolton, and please join me all on my podcast, If Jewels Could Talk. And enjoy Pure, and thank you for hosting us, Pure. See you next time.